Hi, I'm Carol Balzano,
I'm Katie Reed.
and we did our presentation on pesticides in food. Okay, so just a little bit of background on pesticides in food. It produces both beneficial and unwanted effects. The benefits could outweigh the risks, and there's been a lot of talk about that. Many people do believe that synthetic is dangerous and organic is safe. But this is due to a lot of unbalanced reports, and there's just not enough evidence out there to educate the people, especially in America. So there's been discussion about chronic toxicity versus acute toxicity and what these pesticides really have over time and the effects they have over time. So they're kind of looking at our health and how this could, maybe cause some diseases or disorders in our children and whatnot. And there are growing problems. We have contamination of our water and our wildlife habitats. So it could be, these pesticides might not necessarily be on our foods, but they might be getting into our food sources in some type of way, indirectly or directly. And as well, for example, there's a brown plant hopper, and it actually is causing a lot of problems in Indonesia. And we have similar problems here because pesticides are killing their predators of these new pests, and they're becoming very, very abundant and a problem. So what is a pesticide? A pesticide is any substance or mixture of substances intended to prevent, destroy, or mitigate any pest. They can be chemical, bacterial, natural, or synthetic. According to the Ward Law book, I found some really interesting statistics that the EPA allows 10,000 pesticides to be used, through over 300 active ingredients, and 1.2 billion pounds of pesticides are used each year just in the United States. So why use pesticides? Well, pesticides, in the U.S. pesticides destroy 20 billion, pests themselves destroy $20 billion worth of our own crops, despite using pesticides themselves. So we mainly use pesticides for economic reasons. Farmers do believe that they will never be able to stay in business without the use of these pesticides, and we want more cosmetically attractive fruits and vegetables. You're not going to go to the store and buy a fruit or vegetable that has maybe a hole in it from a worm. Back then, that was okay, and now things are changing. These pesticides prevent rotting of our fruits and vegetables. A really cool fact I found from the National Pesticide Information Center is that organic foods don't necessarily not have pesticides on them. They're not necessarily man-made from arsenic. And then regulation of these pesticides. There's protection agencies such as the FDA and the EPA, and they ensure that these residues are going to be at a safe point. The FDA is responsible for enforcing pesticide tolerances, while the EPA must decide that these pesticides don't cause extreme problems. There are discussions about retesting older chemicals before 1970 because there could be potential problems with them causing, say, cancer, and but there's just inadequate funding like anything else. And then I found it kind of interesting that on the EPA website, it argues that by the time we get to these foods, there's very small amounts of pesticides, and it decreases considerably with exposure to light, transportation, harvesting, and cooking.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth about the possible dangers of pesticides, what tests have shown about the use, and how we can limit exposure overall. So to start, how safe are pesticides? Something I found interesting, and according to the CDC, there are actually 29 different traces of pesticides in the average American's body. And so the possible dangers of these pesticides depend on the 4 factors below: potency, concentration, frequency, and resistance. So basically this means the possible dangers depend on how potent the chemical toxin is, how concentrated it is in the food that we eat, how much and how frequent we eat those foods, and our consumer resistance to it. As far as increased risk of use, according to our book, Ward, Law, and Smith, they state that these 3 categories have increased risk for the use of pesticides. So for example, in farming communities, the use of pesticides actually increase the risk of cancer. In U.S. counties, increases problems with lymph, genital, brain, and digestive tract cancers. And in lab animals, it is shown that some chemicals present in the residues of the pesticides can increase birth defects, tumors, sterility, and organ and CNS damage. Good. So testing for pesticides, as far as this, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, tests thousands of products each year, and they're either going to approve them or decline them. So if they're declined, it means that they're illegal or illegal use, obviously not to use them. And this means that the actual use or the amount of the pesticide was in question, and it just didn't fit the recommendations or guidelines for it to be approved. However, they did find in their past studies and their latest studies that 60% of all total samples collected contain no residues, which then allows them to confirm as that pesticides are actually safe for use in our food industry. And one reason for this is going back to the lab animals I talked about. They argue that short-term studies on these lab animals can't pinpoint long-term effects or risks for humans. And they actually even go further to argue that the use of pesticides are safer and less harmful than something such as foodborne illness. So ways to reduce exposure. We as consumers have the ability to use our personal action in order to limit the exposure. And one way to do this is avoid buying pesticide-containing foods. And something I found really interesting, and according to the Environmental Working Group, there are currently 12 foods that have the highest amount of pesticides in them, which some are strawberries, which actually rank number 1, apples, which rank number 2, and then celery and spinach, so your fruits and vegetables. And so by being knowledgeable about the types of foods that are high pesticide-containing foods and avoiding buying them in excess is one way we can limit this exposure. Another way is farmers' exposure. Like Carol said, they want to be in business if they couldn't use pesticides. So if we encourage them to just use fewer pesticides, then our water supply and our food supply will be reduced. And then in reality, it's going to be very hard to limit the complete exposure. So one other way would be following and adhering guidelines that I found in the book and according to the FDA, which is on the next slide. And some of these helpful tips and advice, as you can see, are consume a wide variety of foods, especially regarding fruits, vegetables, and fish, removing the outer leaves of them, trimming the fat off, and avoiding lawns, gardens, and flower beds that have recently been treated with pesticides. And those are our references. Any questions?